Hey everybody, Simone here with Bulletproof Business Growth, as always, with some ideas and insights, what to pay attention to when you are growing and scaling your business. Today, we'll be diving deep into a critical issue facing leaders, how disconnection and silos get in the way of collaboration and performance, and why it's so important to transform your workplace into a space that fosters connection and collaboration. Look, in this day and age, when we have a lot of remote workplaces or hybrid workplaces, when everybody's heads are basically in some form of technology most of the day, it's really easy to lose connection, and it's really easy for people to lose the art of building relationships, which is tremendously important when we want to drive higher level results. So for successful leaders, the workplace isn't just a collection of tasks to be completed. So instead, we want to make this into a living, breathing social system that requires intentional design and curation. But unfortunately, far too many organizations fall really short of this goal. There's no cultivating of meaningful connections and relationships among their teams. Now, you might wonder why this matters. And like I kind of said in the beginning, genuine relationships and places where people care about each other, that equals having better collaboration, consideration of each other, holistic thinking, right? Where you don't just consider your really small piece of pie, but you consider the entire organization. And it's moving away from just thinking about my task, what I need to get done, versus what's the overall shared outcome, what's the overall shared goal that I am a part of, which leads to much, much better results. And then, of course, on the flip side, people are much happier. They have much more satisfaction and fulfillment, engagement. That means you don't have people quitting left and right. That revolving door stops. And people show up at a much higher level altogether. And when I look at what most of our clients complain about, a lot of that is, hey, people just barely show up. They do the bare minimum. They show up for a paycheck. Anytime all hands on deck are needed, people don't really contribute what they can. So community is really, really important. And when we think about why that is like community as a whole, when you have an aligned organization, it performs a whole lot better than the individuals on their own. So it is in your best interest to create community. There's a crazy statistic that I just read in an article this week in Inc., and it said something about 1/3 of employees would rather clean a toilet than ask a coworker for help. Think about that. So this really points to a really disturbing trend of social muscle atrophy in the workplace, because when we're increasingly relying on technology and remote work, that means that everyday practices of building interpersonal skills and strengthening workplace relationships have really weakened. So further, when you think about how that shows up, for many companies, meetings are not really a collaborative space. It's not where everybody pitches in. It's kind of mostly rigid and transactional. Maybe you're just kind of going over the status quo, and it doesn't really lead to engagement. And then when we look at all the tools that we use all day long to communicate, they are pretty siloed and disengaged. Maybe they're practical, maybe they're good for many things, but they're not great for actually bringing together. So this lack of meaningful and regular interaction means that you're going to have a rise in issues like quiet quitting, which people have talked about lots, lower employee engagement, and this general sense of work is more about doing the job, doing a bunch of tasks versus working together towards a common goal. And that's really why, teamwork is the dream work, right? This is like all the sayings around why teams are powerful is because it's the shared brain, it's the shared goals, it's a shared effort towards something that always makes better results happen than if you just have a bunch of different individuals working separately on something. So here's the deal, though. The problem, though, is that the problem here is not with the employees. It's an environment that we've created over time in the modern workplace. And, where it used to be where the office was kind of a public space where people didn't just do the work, they also learned how to work together. So when you think about the old equivalent of, the water cooler talk or those random conversations in the hallway, just bumping into people, this really was very important to help cultivate those social bonds and interpersonal skills, which are really essential for effective communication and collaboration. So when you look at the statistics, and again, this was in this article in Inc. that I was reading, it said something like 56% of employees prefer to work alone. 44% say that their workplace relationships are purely superficial, and 63% believe that technology actually makes it harder to connect and collaborate with their colleagues. So this lack of real and meaningful connections, it also means that we have a lack of practice in navigating social situations, which all leads to significant weakening of these critical skills. So I know a lot of companies have tried to navigate this and mitigate this through things like having some sort of community spaces, with ping pong tables, or there's a bar somewhere at work, or people come together in the cafeteria. But what happens in a lot of companies is when companies have a cafeteria or places where they can grab food, they go back to their desks. So, and when we think about traditional team building exercises, well, for one thing, most people hate them. It's this like awkward moment of like, oh, we all have to do this, and it might be something good that comes out of it, but people don't love it. So team building events and happy hours aren't exactly the fix for that, because what we really want instead is we want a deliberate, thoughtful approach where, as entrepreneurs, we design spaces and structures that truly foster genuine human connection at work. So successful leaders know to take proactive steps to transform their environments into hubs of collaboration and communication. And that starts with regular practice of essential social interactions. So let's talk a little bit about what that could mean and what that could look like. So there's a simple, powerful exercise where you basically drill having micro disagreements, because this is one of the things most people don't like conflict to start with. And as we have all become more disconnected, the art of actually dealing with disagreements has really gone away. So you can have kind of quick, low stakes exercises to practice navigating those minor conflicts and encourage healthy dissent and because you want that back and forth that sparks creativity and innovative thinking. Like, one of the things I always say to our clients is when you're running a good meeting, it means that people feel safe enough and they feel excited enough and they feel engaged enough that they will actually engage in having conflict. And as a leader, it's your job to position this and frame this in a way where it becomes a normal thing to engage in, and everybody understands it's for the greater good. We do this to come up with better ideas. This is challenging each other in a constructive way. And this is not something negative, which a lot of people have that frame around conflict. So this is a safe space to engage in these kind of small social interactions, which will help your employees build the muscle memory for much tougher conversations and being able to work through differences productively without it having this negative connotation to it. And that's really when you get a culture where people aren't afraid of each other, where people recognize that there's a lot of good in different opinions and coming together over different opinions, again, for a greater, better outcome. So another key strategy is to encourage open dialogue within your organization. And one simple tactic is when you end the meeting with an unresolved question or prompt rather than wrapping everything up neatly and everybody just kind of leaves and everything has been done. So leave the tidy conclusions for later and leave the door open for follow-up continued conversations where people can and encourage that this happens. Like, hey, we're going to leave this kind of hanging. Here's a cliffhanger. And by the next meeting or by due date, I'm expecting everybody to put out their input for this so we can come up with the best solution. Or another strategy that I really like is having a floating topic board. You know, if you're brick and mortar, you can have that in your break room or whatever. If you're remote, this can be something on a digital tool, but where employees can anonymously drop ideas and issues to discuss, which helps surface tensions and concerns that may not get brought up otherwise. So if there's something that, you know, people are concerned about, they can bring this up in an anonymous way so that it's something that can get picked up in your weekly action review meeting. Another great idea is consider setting up cross-collaborational team. So when you think about that, it's like these are kind of like thought partner sessions where employees work through problems together, and they don't have to arrive at immediate solutions, but it's again something to foster discussions, respect for each other, opening kind of the door for transparent conversations. And this is how your team meetings should be run anyway. This should be something that happens in your company every single week when you have your weekly action review meeting, where a good portion of that meeting is designed to bring people together and have them discuss and have conflict and interact around something that you want better solutions for. So the overarching goal really is here to design your workplace to facilitate meaningful interactions and relationship building versus kind of leaving those critical elements to chance and hoping that they'll just kind of happen. So when you're a forward-thinking leader, like one practice that I've seen is really actually mapping out silos, looking at your organizational chart, looking at where, you know, you find situations where you have repeatedly gaps happen and you don't really understand why this is happening. So you want to map out those disconnects within your organization and then deliberately build bridges, strategies, and structures to foster more collaborative, cross-functional conversation. Another way to look at this is, you know, when you have socially disengaged employees, and sometimes that could just be somebody who is an extreme introvert or, you know, is still newer in the organization. So pair those people with high engagement mentors. Like one thing I always encourage our clients to do is when you have new hires, you know, give them a culture buddy so that they have somebody who is engaged, who loves mentoring, who loves being kind of a coach, and they can ask the, stupid questions. They can ask the things they wouldn't normally want to ask. And they're also the ones that can kind of show them the ropes in terms of how we do things around here and what these are our standards and values and everything like that. So that's a really good idea when you have somebody new. But same thing when you have somebody who just doesn't engage much, who's shy, who's introverted, because then you can bring in this person who doesn't have those issues, who is kind of the social glue in your organization, and that can really help moderate a whole lot of friction before you have any small tension grow into bigger problems. And look, I mean, this is not just about designated social events and team building activities. What I'm really talking about here is a practice where, as the leader, you really notice, like, where are our gaps? Where are people not communicating? Why do I see all across the board that people are kind of sticking to their own projects, to their own practices, and I'm not really seeing a whole lot of collaboration here? So what you really want to do is fundamentally reshape the way your people interact with each other on a day-to-day basis. So not just those one-off events once in a while, but we want this structure all the time. And look, I mean, the key here is to know that the best teams don't leave connections to chance. They weave it into the very fabric of how they work together. And by creating those intentional connections and spaces and structures for genuine dialogue and healthy debate and meaningful interactions, this is how you can truly transform your company kind of from a series of to-dos and siloed tasks into having a vibrant culture, ecosystem, community that really brings the collaboration and innovation, which is, of course, what you absolutely want. So remember what I said before, over 56% of employees prefer to work alone, and 44% of them describe their work relationships as very superficial. And honestly, that's not because people don't want to connect. Well, for one thing, they have gotten much more uncomfortable with connection because it's not something that is just part of their everyday reality. But it's also because today's workplaces make it increasingly difficult to have that. So as a leader, it's up to you to reverse this and cultivate a culture where people truly feel seen and heard and empowered. And then they work together in the pursuit of your shared goals. Of course, you want to have all those things. So I hope you give this a try. Really think about this. Like, I want you to notice, I invite you to notice what is going on in your company in terms of this, and take some simple steps towards mitigating this right away. And honestly, it starts with having really good team meetings where you open up the floor, you bring in a great agenda of discussion that people consider before they even show up to meetings. There's so many ways that you can encourage this kind of communication so that it's just part of your everyday fabric and DNA of your team. So that's all we have time for today. Until next time, keep transforming your workplace into a great place of connection, success, collaboration, and pick up those little ideas and see how that can transform what you do. We have a great new training out. I really hope you've already checked it out. If you haven't, it's at bizscalingblueprint.com, bizscalingblueprint.com. Check it out. There's a lot of really good content in there, and I will see you next time.